Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Obviously you can see there is no snooker table in sight. That's because we're here in the beautiful city of Bruges in Belgium, where I've come to have a chat with brain and performance coach, Chris Henry. So Chris, here we are in the beautiful Bruges. I've come obviously to have a chat with you. And just before we get started, I just want to know, why are we in Bruges to start with?
It's a good question. Quite a few years ago now, back in the late 80s, I managed to win a final live on TV in Holland. And a businessman in Belgium saw that final. And because I won the final, I gave an interview after the final and said that I was going to Antwerp to do some coaching at a club which he happened to own. So he came over to Antwerp, introduced himself, offered me a contract. I was back 24 then, 24 years of age. And he had a house available for me to live in a little town called Bruges I'd never heard of. This is now we're in Antwerp. So I said, oh, well, first of all, I'd like to see the place. And he drove me over to Bruges, showed me the house, showed me around the town. And it's, of course, absolutely beautiful here. So he offered me a contract with a salary and a car and this house for 12 months back in 1989. And basically since then, I've been living here, and I have a partner and we have 3 daughters, and that's why we're in Bruges.
Yeah, because you're actually from not too far from me, are you? You're originally from Accrington way.
Yeah,
I know.
I was born in the Ribble Valley, in Worley, the Ribble Valley, but actually spent most of my time living in Accrington. And that was interesting because when I was about 9, 10, a certain Alex Higgins came over from Northern Ireland. One of his managers was John McLaughlin, and the practice club that he came to was the Elite Snooker Club, or we would say locally F.E.A.R.
That's a Lancastrian
Yeah.
thing.
Dennis Taylor used to practice there. So I actually used to pull the balls out of the snooker pockets for Alex Higgins. And that was my first introduction to seeing somebody incredibly talented.
Yeah.
And it sort of got into my blood. Like I said, I was only 9 or 10. And then I started to play a lot more because of that. And started to win tournaments, won the Observer Cup. Yeah, so I'm actually from East Lancashire, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously you're not just a coach, but you're a great snooker player as well. Obviously, you played to a high level.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure. I mean, I beat Stephen Hendry in the British under-21 semi-final, back when he was 16 and I was 18, 19. Made 147s in practice, made century breaks in tournament play. So yeah, played to a very high level. My problem was I was very good at other sports like football, Blackburn Rovers apprentice, um, badminton, Lancashire, Northern English tennis champion. I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, but let's say distracted by lots of different things. You could never really commit to doing one of them. And I think if you're going to be professional in any sport, you have to make a decision and commit and go full in.
Yeah. So obviously why we're here, I posted a video on YouTube a few weeks ago. It was just a short video. And I asked the question of what separates the best from the rest. Obviously, not just in snooker, but in all aspects of sport. Obviously, you've worked with golfers as well. So we'll get onto that in a little bit. But, from a viewer's point of view, what happens when we get in what we call a pressure situation?
In a pressure situation, that's a good point. And that's an interesting point. Pressure, what is that? In sport, it's not really pressure. There is pressure. I mean, there's pressure in the tire on your car, of course. But pressure, let me try and explain what that is exactly. And this is coming from a neuroscience perspective, because I'm a person that studied a lot of neuroscience in America, understanding how the brain works and what functions and why things happen in certain ways. So pressure, what is that? It's an emotional state being experienced by the individual based on the meaning that the subconscious part of their brain is giving to the current situation.
Yeah.
So how that person's subconscious brain is currently wired, it gives meaning to things. And the brain is very primal. A part of the brain, the amygdala, is basically its job is to keep us alive. And if it starts to see things it doesn't recognize, certain things start to fire. We can get very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So it's not pressure. It's an emotional state being created by that person's subconscious brain.
Yeah. So obviously, we spoke about these things before, and quite a funny one is obviously if we're watching a horror movie, for example.
Well, and that's a clear demonstration, and it's a good point that the subconscious part of our brain does not know the difference between real and not real, between fantasy and reality. And that's a good point. You can literally go to a cinema to watch a horror movie. It's just simply a white plastic screen on the wall. There's a little bit of light flashed up onto that screen, but your brain is turning that into something that is making you quite afraid. And within 10 to 15 minutes of watching that film,
Yeah.
you literally could be looking through your fingers, frightened to death. So that's the brain turning something that's not real into something that is real for you in that moment. And that is a similar scenario to what the brain is doing in a sports situation. It's creating these neurotransmitters and chemicals to fire, causing us to feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah. So I've had a situation where, obviously, yourself, we've done a little bit of work together, and I have a situation where when I'm getting into match situations, I may start feel a little bit uncomfortable. So, we're obviously we're doing things, and we're working on this. And again, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but this can happen in all aspects of life, not just sport, but in life as well. So you've obviously worked in not just snooker, but a very, very high level in golf as well. So let's talk about, you've worked with Rafa Cabrera-Bello. You've been with him at the Ryder Cup. You've been with him at the Masters at Augusta. You've worked with Lee Westwood, Joust Luyten,
Yeah,
and Gavin Green.
absolutely.
So you've worked with all those players. So from the perspective of, let's say, Rafa Cabrera-Bello, when he's walking out on that first tee at the Ryder Cup, how is he feeling? And what are you saying to them players in that situation?
Well, and that's a very good point. How is Rafa feeling in a situation where it's his first ever Ryder Cup? He's representing a team, so now he has team members relying on him. That's going on in his mind, and he tees that ball up on the first tee. Do you think he's going to be totally relaxed and calm, or do you think he's going to be completely in a different state, being nervous? And this is an important thing. People say, "What are nerves?" Well, if you think about the butterflies, when you get this
Yeah.
uncomfortable feeling in your tummy, that's actually your body preparing to perform. Because the brain is basically saying to the stomach, let's pump the blood out from that area around into the muscles to get ready to perform in that situation. So you should actually embrace being nervous, but of course not to a point where you can't function, where muscle tension takes over and actually the mechanics get affected at golf. So we work on something called neural rewiring, which is a way to reprogram the subconscious to deal with things in those moments in a much more efficient way.
Yeah. So the butterflies, is that something different than people have obviously heard the fight or flight response?
Hmm.
Is that something completely different, or is it a very similar thing?
It's a similar thing because the brain is basically instructing the body to do certain things. And in the fight, flight, and freeze scenario, where we are very uncomfortable, there's certain chemicals start to fire, like epinephrine or adrenaline, cortisol. And when these things start to fire, I mean, cortisol, for example, comes into the frontal cortex and it even inhibits the way we think. So decision making gets affected. So, in terms of making a decision on a snooker table, that can be affected by the way you're feeling. We always say that emotion is the biggest impact on performance. So when these things start to fire like fight, flash, and freeze, that's the brain basically seeing something it doesn't recognize, and it's instructing the brain that there's something not quite right here,
Yeah.
and we might have to either run away or fight or get aggressive or do something that we actually don't really want to be doing in the moment when we've got to hit a golf ball or pot the black off his spot. So the question then is if you get into that state, what happens then? I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. You can't just consciously turn that off. That's your subconscious. Your subconscious is about 97% of your brain power. And all of these things are controlled subconsciously. What you've got to look to do is to reprogram the subconscious to be able to deal with these things when these things arise in the future. If you do get completely out of your comfort zone, we'll use something that someone like Djokovic would use. And I had a conversation with Tiger Woods about this at the Ryder Cup. He was injured, and we had a good conversation. And I said, Tiger, you know, in these moments when you get really uncomfortable, what do you do? And he uses something called catharsis, where he actually blasts, changes his physiology, changes the way he's talking to himself, reminds himself of his keys, the process-oriented keys that he can control, get back to doing those things. 10 seconds of a blast, Djokovic puts his towel over his face between a game, and he just blasts it all out for 10 seconds. But it's not a negative thing. It's a positive way to change your state back from, let's say, back foot, fight, flight, freeze, to more front foot positivity, and now getting into a more alpha brainwave state, not beta, where the brain then communicates with the body in the optimum way.
Yeah. And I'm sure everyone has been in this situation at some point.
In life,
Yeah.
everybody experiences this.
Yeah.
You know, literally, you can be in a car and somebody can come past you and you nearly have an accident. You can get this horrible feeling up your leg, right through your spine, into your brain. You're shaking. You can, you know, have you ever tried to public speak? Have you ever been best man at a wedding?
Yeah, I hated it.
Public speaking is one of the major fears for people, because people are looking at you, and because one of the major fears is, what do people think about us? We're concerned what people think. So when you're up on that stage or in front of this crowd talking, your brain's going wild about, am I saying the right words? How are they perceiving this? What do they think about me? And that's why all these fears come in. But of course, that word fear is very interesting. F.E.A.R, false evidence appearing real. So most of our fears are not actually real.
No.
That cinema situation with the horror movie, it's not real. You know, you don't necessarily have to be afraid of it. You wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning having just had a nightmare. Now, that nightmare is not real, but you're sweating and you're shaking until the point where you realize, my goodness, that was only a dream. But I'm experiencing it like it really happened. And this is the way the subconscious brain works.
I know that I've been in that situation where, especially when you play on either table 1 or table 2 in the snooker tournament, the television,
People watching.
yeah, you got everybody watching. You got the commentators, you got the crowd. Obviously, you want to perform to your best, but sometimes when you get out there is that fight or flight situation where the nerves start taking over. Say, like your heart is racing.
Yes.
And you know, you want to try and perform at your best, but it's not that obviously that easy to do.
No.
Obviously, we want to try and be in them situations and do it on what we call autopilot, so without thinking.
Yeah.
I remember you saying a story when you worked with Lee Westwood out on the golf course, and there was a situation where I think it was when he was getting on the green that perhaps he was taking a little bit too long over his shot, so overthinking things.
Absolutely. Yeah, overthinking is a big problem because you're not trusting your instinct. You're not trusting your ability to do something. So Lee was actually at around 13 seconds from the moment he put his club face to the ball on the tee box to actually pulling the trigger. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Because the conscious process was already finished by about 5-6 seconds. So now you've got 6-7 seconds of real nothingness, where the amygdala part of the brain is now looking for potential danger, like things like bunkers, out of bounds, and that kind of stuff, rough trees. You know, you can start to get busy with that stuff if you take too long over the shot. Also taking too long over putts as well. And, you know, you don't want to be taking too long. You don't want to rush. But basically, at the end of the conscious process, you want to pull the trigger. And snooker is exactly the same thing. You know, you don't want to get into overthinking, taking too long over a situation that is obvious because you're not feeling comfortable enough to go ahead and do it. And if you look at, you know, the most natural players in the game, like Ronnie O'Sullivan, for example, Mark Williams is pretty natural as well. Marco Fu recently, probably faster than anybody else.
Yeah, I've certainly noticed that.
You know, these players are more instinctive. So what are they doing? They're relying more on the habit to be able to control things without consciously thinking about it. A bit like driving a car. You know, you learn to drive a car, you consciously have to learn how to do the gears and the clutch timing, and the car is probably jerking a little bit.
Yeah.
And after a few months, all of a sudden, you've created this little piece of software, a cluster of neural connections, that now controls your body to drive that car without conscious intervention. And now you can literally drive for an hour.
Yeah,
I mean, and not even remember the journey.
that's it. Yeah, I think when I've had it before, and I'm sure you have, where you have got a car journey and you end up on the phone, obviously on your hands free, and you're speaking to someone, and before you know it, you're at your destination. You have no idea. You can't remember the journey. You just remember talking to a person. So,
Right.
you're driving that car on autopilot.
And you're consciously diverted by that telephone conversation. So that's what we call conscious diversion, whilst the habit is controlling everything else. And even a part of the brain called the reticular activation cells system is identifying everything around. So if a car comes from the side, it automatically spots it, and you will respond in the appropriate way.
Yeah.
It's amazing what the brain's capable of. It's our job to program that subconscious brain to do the things and respond to the things in a way that we want it to.
Yeah. So now we've got a good idea of why these reactions happen in these kind of perceived pressure situations. Obviously, I don't want you to give all your tips and things.
Don't worry, I won't.
But have you anything that our viewers can take away where, they can maybe work on something themselves to have perhaps better themselves in these situations?
There's absolutely some great techniques that can be implemented. Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier a little bit about the Sean Murphy story, and I started to work with Sean in 2013, and one of his major goals, something he'd never achieved at that time, was to make a 147 break live on television. He'd done it in matches outside of television, but he'd not done it live on TV. And he said to me, when I get close to that 147 live on TV with all these people watching, I get so nervous. I start to shake, and I just don't feel like I can get through that barrier and make the 147. So this is one real key. If anybody's watching this video, let's imagine that you've got a highest break of, let's say, 90, and your goal is to make a century break. Your job now is to create some memory files in the hippocampus through repetition before you try to achieve that goal.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? For example, your highest break's 90. We're going to start on 85, and we'll have 3 reds on the table. And now you're going to pot the red, and we're going to go 86. And you pot the pink, and we'll go 92. And you pot the red, 93. Now, you'll probably see that player starting to overthink, choke a little bit more, walk around the table, give this shot all this attention, build it up, and consciously now get really involved, reducing the probability of actually following through. And so by getting through that sensory barrier in practice over and over and over, you're creating memory files in the brain, because the brain takes it as fact. As we know, it deals with things as fact. And through repetition, you create enough of these memory files and experience so that if that scenario happens in real, the probability now is the amygdala, the part of the brain that's looking for these things, starts to recognize that more, and you respond more naturally to that situation, allowing you to stay in the correct alpha brainwave state where the brain is communicating with the body and follow through and do what's necessary. And so the 147 story with Sean Murphy is fascinating, because we were in the club in Urmston in Manchester, Con Club, and I put 3 reds on the table and the colours. And Sean said, Chris, he said, can you count? He said, I'm talking about a 147, mate. I said, Sean, I appreciate that. I said, we're talking about a 147, but there's 3 reds here. I'd like you to put 3 reds, 3 blacks, and all the colours. Bear in mind, the club's packed. There's other tables playing. So what I want to do now, I want to get these guys involved. So he pots the first red, and I shout loud, 97. Murph sort of looks over his shoulder at me. And then he pots the black, and I'm clapping now. And all these other people are watching. And I shout loud, 104. Put the black back. And he's sort of, you can see Sean's taking a little bit more time, and he misses the next red. Straightforward red.
Yeah.
And he came over to me and said, look at my hands. Some hands are shaky, right? He said, very similar to what it would be doing in real. I said, well, that's because the brain is seeing that like it's real. I said, so anyway, we're going to repeat this. It took us 9 attempts in a routine he would never have a problem with. He did his 147 with 3 reds and colours, and we videoed it. Now, he watched that video repetitively over days and weeks, and he did that routine at least once every day, 3 reds, 3 blacks, and the colours, counting like it's real, creating the memory files. And lo and behold, 2014, you see it on YouTube, have a look, Sean Murphy, 147 break in the league. He followed through and managed to do that and make a 147. And he said afterwards, I felt a little bit nervous, but nowhere near like normal.
Yeah.
He said, and actually, I felt like I was going to do it. So the belief about being able to do it was changed as well. And a belief is a cluster of neurons caused by repetition. That's an important point. A few weeks later, he did a second 147 live on TV. And a few months later, he made 3 in the same calendar year. Currently, he's the only player to have made 3 in a calendar year.
Well,
But we've got Satchaya,
yeah.
2025 now. He's made 2. And Ronnie O'Sullivan made 2 in the same match. So there's 2 players there that have made 2 maximums this season.
Yeah.
That could match and equal Sean's achievement of 3 147s in the same calendar year. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. I don't know how many you'd imagine. Well, I know we can never say for sure, but the way Tepchai has been playing as well. These last 2 events, and Ronnie. Let's not forget Ronnie. Obviously, I can see that certainly being equalled. I think at some point, but whether someone will get more than 3, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's very possible, isn't it? I mean, and if you watch those 2 players, Tepchaya, Unnu, and Ronnie O'Sullivan, very instinctive, way under 20 seconds average shot time. They're not taking too long. They're relying on their instinct. They're trusting the habits of the way they play. And that's the way to play sport. Be as instinctive as possible, because it's the habits that's been created to do that job. Consciously allow that process to take place.
Yeah. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. Really enjoyed it, Ian.
Cheers.
All the
Thank you.
best.
Cheers.